Hey everyone, and welcome to Sleep and Learn. Tonight, we dive into one of the most fascinating mysteries of the human mind, the illusion of self. Who are you, really? Is your identity something solid, or is it a story your brain is constantly rewriting? Relax, listen, and let your thoughts drift as we explore the hidden nature of consciousness. The nature of consciousness, the inner universe. Human consciousness is one of the most mysterious and fascinating phenomena known to science. It is the silent observer behind every thought, the invisible presence that experiences reality, remembers the past, and imagines the future. Despite centuries of philosophical inquiry and decades of scientific research, consciousness remains only partially understood, often described as the greatest unsolved problem in science. At its most basic level, consciousness can be defined as the state of being aware of the external world, of internal thoughts, and of one's own existence. This awareness creates what we call subjective experience, sometimes referred to as qualia, the redness of a sunset, the taste of coffee, the feeling of nostalgia. These experiences cannot be fully explained by physical processes alone, which leads to one of the central questions. How does the brain create experience? The human brain contains approximately 86 billion neurons, each forming thousands of connections. These networks constantly exchange electrical and chemical signals, forming patterns of activity that correlate with thoughts, emotions, and perceptions. However, while neuroscience can map which brain regions are active during certain experiences, it cannot yet explain why these activities produce a felt experience rather than occurring silently like a machine. One of the most intriguing aspects of consciousness is that it is continuous, yet also fragmented. At any given moment, we are aware of only a small portion of the information our brain processes. This is due to attention, a filtering system that selects what enters conscious awareness. Without attention, consciousness would be overwhelmed by sensory input. Instead, it highlights what is relevant, allowing us to focus on a conversation, a task, or a single thought among millions of possibilities. Consciousness also has layers. At the surface is waking consciousness, the everyday state in which we think, act, and perceive. Beneath it lies the subconscious, where habits, automatic responses, and learned behaviors operate. Deeper still is the unconscious, a domain that stores memories, instincts, and processes outside of awareness. These layers interact constantly, shaping behavior in ways we often do not notice. Another remarkable feature is the sense of self, the feeling that there is a me experiencing the world. This sense is so natural that it feels permanent, yet research shows it is constructed by the brain. Specific networks, particularly in the prefrontal cortex and default mode network, generate a narrative identity, a story about who we are. This story evolves over time, integrating memories, beliefs, and expectations into a coherent sense of existence. Time perception is also deeply tied to consciousness. Humans experience time as flowing from past to future, but this perception is not fixed. In moments of danger, time may seem to slow down. During routine activities, it may pass quickly. This suggests that consciousness actively constructs the experience of time rather than simply observing it. Sleep provides further insight into the nature of consciousness. During deep sleep, awareness nearly disappears, while in dreams, consciousness persists in a different form, one that is detached from external reality and driven by internal imagery. This shows that consciousness does not depend entirely on sensory input. It can generate entire worlds from within. Philosophers have long debated whether consciousness is purely a product of the brain or something more fundamental. Some theories propose that consciousness arises from complex information processing, while others suggest it may be a fundamental property of the universe, similar to space and time. This idea, known as panpsychism, remains controversial but highlights how little is truly known. Modern science approaches consciousness from multiple angles. Neuroscience studies the brain, psychology examines behavior and cognition, and physics explores the nature of reality itself. Together, these fields aim to answer a profound question: why does subjective experience exist at all? As research continues, new technologies such as brain imaging and artificial intelligence provide deeper insights. Yet, the mystery remains. Consciousness is both the tool we use to explore reality and the very phenomenon we are trying to understand. It is the observer and the observed, the question and the answer, an inner universe as vast and complex as the cosmos itself. The brain and consciousness: how matter becomes mind. The human brain is often described as the most complex structure in the known universe. Weighing only about 1.4 kilograms, it contains a dense network of neurons and glial cells that together generate every thought, emotion, perception, and decision a person experiences. Yet the most profound mystery remains: how does this physical organ give rise to the immaterial experience of consciousness? Neurons are the fundamental building blocks of the brain. Each neuron communicates with others through electrical impulses and chemical signals across synapses. These interactions form dynamic networks that constantly change, a property known as neuroplasticity. Through this adaptability, the brain can learn new skills, store memories, and recover, at least partially, from injury. However, while we can observe these processes, the transformation from neural activity to subjective experience remains unexplained. One major scientific approach to understanding consciousness focuses on identifying the neural correlates of consciousness, NCC. These are specific patterns of brain activity that consistently correspond with conscious experience. For example, activity in the visual cortex is associated with seeing, while regions in the temporal lobe are linked to recognizing faces and objects. By mapping these correlations, scientists aim to pinpoint where and how consciousness arises in the brain. Among the many brain regions involved, the cerebral cortex plays a central role. This thin outer layer of the brain is responsible for higher-order functions such as reasoning, language, and abstract thought. Within it, the prefrontal cortex is particularly important for self-awareness, decision-making, and planning. Damage to this area can alter personality and disrupt the sense of self, providing strong evidence that consciousness is deeply rooted in brain structure. Another critical network is the default mode network, DMN, which becomes active when the mind is at rest and not focused on the external world. This network is associated with introspection, daydreaming, and thinking about the past or future. It is, in many ways, the neural basis of the inner narrative, the voice inside the mind that continuously constructs and reflects on personal identity. Consciousness is not a single unified process, but rather a coordinated activity across multiple brain systems. Sensory information is processed in specialized regions, emotions are shaped by structures like the amygdala, and attention is regulated by networks spanning the parietal and frontal lobes. The integration of these processes creates the seamless experience of being aware, even though it arises from many separate components. One influential theory that attempts to explain this integration is the Global Workspace Theory, GWT. According to this model, the brain operates like a stage. Many unconscious processes occur behind the scenes, but when information enters the global workspace, it becomes conscious and is broadcast to different parts of the brain. This allows various systems, memory, perception, and decision-making, to access and use the same information simultaneously. Another major framework is Integrated Information Theory, IIT, which suggests that consciousness corresponds to the amount of integrated information within a system. In this view, a system is conscious to the extent that it cannot be reduced to independent parts without losing information. This theory attempts to quantify consciousness, proposing that it exists on a spectrum rather than as an all-or-nothing phenomenon. Experiments using brain imaging technologies such as functional MRI, fMRI, and electroencephalography, EEG, have provided valuable insights into conscious states. These tools allow scientists to observe brain activity in real time, revealing patterns associated with wakefulness, sleep, anesthesia, and even altered states induced by meditation or psychedelics. Such studies show that consciousness can vary in intensity and structure, rather than simply being on or off. Cases of brain injury further highlight the connection between matter and mind. Damage to specific regions can lead to profound changes in perception and identity. For instance, individuals with certain types of brain damage may lose the ability to recognize faces, experience time normally, or even perceive parts of their own body. These conditions demonstrate that what we perceive as a unified self depends on precise neural functioning. Yet, despite all these discoveries, a fundamental gap remains, often called the hard problem of consciousness. While science can explain how the brain processes information, it cannot yet explain why these processes are accompanied by subjective experience. Why does neural activity feel like something from the inside? Why is there an inner world at all? Some researchers believe that solving this mystery will require entirely new scientific frameworks, possibly bridging neuroscience with physics or information theory. Others argue that consciousness may never be fully explained in purely objective terms because it is inherently subjective. What is clear, however, is that consciousness emerges from the brain in ways that are both deeply physical and profoundly mysterious. The brain is not merely a machine processing data. It is the source of meaning, awareness, and experience. It transforms electrical signals into the richness of human life. Thoughts, emotions, dreams, and the sense of being. As we continue to explore the relationship between brain and mind, each discovery brings us closer to understanding ourselves. Yet at the same time, it reveals how much remains unknown. The journey to understand consciousness is not just a scientific endeavor, it is an exploration of what it means to exist. Altered states of consciousness, dreams, meditation, and beyond. Consciousness is not a fixed state but a dynamic spectrum that can shift in depth, clarity, and structure. While waking awareness feels stable and continuous, the human mind is capable of entering radically different states, each with its own patterns of perception, emotion, and cognition. These altered states of consciousness reveal that our everyday experience is only one version of many possible realities the brain can construct. One of the most familiar altered states is dreaming. During sleep, especially in the rapid eye movement (REM) phase, the brain becomes highly active while the body remains largely immobile. In this state, the mind generates vivid experiences without external input. Dreams can feel as real as waking life, complete with emotions, sensory details, and narratives. Yet they often follow unusual logic, blending memories, fears, and imagination into surreal scenarios. This suggests that consciousness does not require the external world to create a fully immersive reality. Lucid dreaming takes this phenomenon a step further. In a lucid dream, the dreamer becomes aware that they are dreaming and may even gain control over the dream environment. This creates a unique hybrid state where elements of waking self-awareness coexist with the immersive qualities of dreaming. Researchers study lucid dreaming as a window into self-awareness, exploring how the brain can reflect on its own state while remaining inside an internally generated world. Meditation offers another pathway into altered consciousness, but unlike dreams, it is entered deliberately and with awareness. Through practices such as focused attention or mindfulness, individuals can quiet the constant flow of thoughts and observe their own mental processes. Advanced meditators often report experiences of deep calm, timelessness, and a reduced sense of self. Brain studies show that meditation can alter activity in regions associated with attention and the default mode network, suggesting a shift away from narrative thinking toward present moment awareness. Some meditative states are described as transcendent, where the boundary between self and environment seems to dissolve. In these moments, individuals may feel a sense of unity with the world or a profound stillness beyond ordinary thought. While these experiences are deeply subjective, they are remarkably consistent across cultures and traditions, indicating that the human brain may be wired to access such states under certain conditions. Hypnosis represents yet another altered state, characterized by focused attention, increased suggestibility, and reduced peripheral awareness. Contrary to popular myths, hypnosis does not involve losing control, but rather entering a state where the mind becomes more responsive to specific ideas or instructions. This state has been used therapeutically to manage pain, reduce anxiety, and modify habits, demonstrating the flexibility of conscious experience. Psychoactive substances provide a more dramatic alteration of consciousness. Compounds such as psilocybin, LSD, and others interact with brain chemistry, particularly serotonin systems, leading to profound changes in perception, emotion, and sense of self. Users often report intensified colors, altered time perception, and experiences of ego dissolution. Scientific research into these substances has resurged in recent years, exploring their potential therapeutic benefits for conditions like depression and post-traumatic stress disorder. Altered states can also occur naturally in extreme conditions. Sensory deprivation, intense physical exertion, or life-threatening situations can shift consciousness in unexpected ways. Some individuals report out-of-body experiences or a sense of detachment from reality. These phenomena suggest that consciousness is highly sensitive to both internal and external changes, capable of reorganizing itself under pressure. Another intriguing state is the flow state, often experienced during activities that require deep focus and skill, such as sports, art, or music. In this state, individuals feel fully immersed in the present moment, with a heightened sense of control and a loss of self-consciousness. Time may seem to slow down or disappear entirely. Flow represents an optimal balance between challenge and ability, where consciousness becomes highly efficient and unified. Near-death experiences, NDEs, provide some of the most mysterious examples of altered consciousness. People who have come close to death sometimes report vivid experiences such as moving through a tunnel, encountering bright light, or feeling a profound sense of peace. While these experiences are often interpreted in spiritual terms, scientists investigate them as brain-based phenomena, possibly linked to changes in oxygen levels, neural activity, or chemical release during extreme stress. What unites all these states is their ability to reveal the flexibility of the human mind. Consciousness is not a single, fixed condition but a range of possible modes, each shaped by brain activity, environment, and internal focus. These variations challenge the assumption that waking reality is the most real or complete form of experience. Studying altered states not only expands our understanding of consciousness but also offers practical insights. Techniques like meditation and controlled breathing can improve mental health, while research into psychedelics may lead to new therapies. At the same time, these states raise profound philosophical questions about the nature of reality and the boundaries of the self. Ultimately, altered states of consciousness remind us that the mind is not limited to ordinary perception. It is a dynamic system capable of creating, transforming, and exploring entirely different modes of experience. By studying these states, we gain a deeper understanding of the hidden dimensions of the human mind. The illusion of self, identity, ego, and the constructed mind. The sense of having a stable, unified self feels undeniable. Each person experiences life from a first-person perspective, with a continuous identity that seems to persist through time. Yet modern science and philosophy suggest that this sense of self may not be as solid as it appears. Instead, it may be a carefully constructed model, an ongoing process created by the brain to organize experience and guide behavior. At its core, the self is a narrative. The brain continuously weaves together memories, beliefs, emotions, and perceptions into a coherent story about who we are. This narrative is not fixed. It evolves with every new experience. What we call identity is, in many ways, a dynamic autobiography, constantly edited and updated. This explains why people can change over time while still feeling like the same person. Neuroscience points to specific brain networks involved in constructing this sense of self, particularly those associated with introspection and memory. When these networks are active, individuals tend to think about themselves, their past, their future, their relationships. This internal storytelling creates continuity, giving the impression of a stable identity even though the underlying processes are constantly changing. The concept of the ego plays a central role in this construction. The ego can be understood as the part of the mind that defines personal identity and separates the self from the external world. It creates boundaries. This is me and that is not me. While this distinction is useful for survival and social interaction, it can also lead to conflict, anxiety, and a rigid sense of identity. Interestingly, the sense of self can be disrupted under certain conditions. Neurological disorders, brain injuries, or even experimental setups can alter or fragment identity. Some individuals experience conditions in which they feel detached from their own body or perceive themselves as multiple distinct identities. These phenomena demonstrate that the self is not a fixed entity but a fragile construct dependent on brain function. Psychological experiments have also revealed how easily the sense of self can be manipulated. In the famous rubber hand illusion, participants begin to feel that a fake hand is part of their own body when it is stroked in synchrony with their hidden real hand. This shows that body ownership, a fundamental aspect of selfhood, is based on the brain's integration of sensory signals rather than on any inherent truth. Memory plays a crucial role in maintaining identity, yet it is far from reliable. Memories are not perfect recordings of the past. They are reconstructions that can be altered over time. Each time a memory is recalled, it can be modified before being stored again. This means that the story of the self is built on a shifting foundation, raising questions about how much of our identity is truly accurate. Philosophers have long questioned whether a permanent self exists at all. Some traditions argue that the self is an illusion, a convenient concept rather than a real entity. According to this view, what we call the self is simply a collection of processes, perceptions, thoughts, and sensations arising and passing away. There is no central observer, only the experience itself. Modern cognitive science often aligns with this perspective. Rather than a single self, the brain may contain multiple systems that compete and cooperate to guide behavior. Decisions can emerge from unconscious processes before reaching awareness, suggesting that the feeling of being in control may also be part of the constructed narrative. Despite its illusory nature, the sense of self has powerful effects. It shapes how we interpret the world, how we relate to others, and how we make decisions. A strong, coherent identity can provide stability and purpose, while a fragmented or unstable sense of self can lead to confusion and distress. In this way, the illusion of self, even if not fundamentally real, is functionally essential. Certain practices, such as meditation or deep introspection, can weaken the sense of self. Individuals often report experiences in which the boundary between self and world dissolves, leading to a feeling of unity or ego dissolution. These states can be both profound and disorienting, offering a glimpse into consciousness without the usual framework of identity. The idea that the self is constructed does not mean it is meaningless. Rather, it suggests that identity is flexible and open to change. People can reshape their sense of self through new experiences, habits, and perspectives. This flexibility is one of the defining features of human consciousness, allowing growth, adaptation, and transformation. Ultimately, the self may be best understood not as a thing, but as a process, a continuous act of creation performed by the brain. It is a story we tell ourselves, a model that helps us navigate reality. And while that story may never be perfectly true, it is the lens through which we experience existence itself.